Oh, I see. Sorry. Okay. I grew up with my grandparents. My grandfather, before the war, Frank H. Hale, was the 17th richest man in the Philippines, according to records, and was socially and politically well connected. General MacArthur asked him to participate in preparing for the war. He closed his rattan factories in Santa Ana and used the buildings to store medical supplies for use at Nichols Field, even if that was not very close, and the community.
What did you get her to Xerox?
My grandfather protected for the physical and financial well-being of all our employees, giving them early bonuses and dividing the bank accounts for them to live on when confiscation started. When bombing started, they built air raid shelters in Santa Ana, Paco, Pandacan, and our family homes using scrap leather instead of sand. And there was an air raid shelter in beside almost every Catholic church. The factory clinic was put on emergency basis. When Open City was declared, we were under Japanese military interrogation constantly. Grandpa asked the military what right they had to take ESCO when ESCO was being prepared to be a Philippine corporation upon independence. The officers and their lawyers did not seem to have the answer and kept Grandpa out of concentration camp, even when other Americans were already brought there. And some of them were our own American employees. A Japanese colonel occupied one of our rental houses across the street and sent his chef to our house to cook Japanese food, and we had American and Japanese food for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And after lunch, he and my grandfather would sit in the sala and listen to me play the piano. He was a very nice man, but we couldn't figure out why he was there. And soon, about 2 weeks after he occupied the place, a civilian group of Japanese came from Japan, and along with Japanese lawyers and military officers, came stating that everything belonging to my grandfather belonged to the Japanese military. However, it was a civilian crew that came and ran the factory. The fact that one half belonged to my Filipina grandmother did not stop them. Only then was he taken to camp, after all this was put in paper, signed, transferred. Then my grandmother and my grandfather made a pact that he would go to camp and she would go and hide the family. My grandmother was from Calamba, Laguna, and very close to the Rizal family. The Calambeños asked us if we would like to move there so that we could have their support and probably also have underground support. And my grandmother decided that we wouldn't do that so that we could get close to Santo Tomas, where we could bring food to my grandfather. But in the meantime, I learned how to hide. I was smudged with mud all the time and learned how to hide behind our heavy draperies and behind armoires. And one day, a massacre occurred in our rattan factory grounds. Our, our house was 3 stories. The 4th floor was a roof garden. And the Japanese military brought their machine guns up there and started shooting at looters who were then looting the medical supplies in the rattan factories. In the meantime, one evening, my family was lined up against the wall while they were doing this massacre, and we were watched by guarded by a Japanese soldier with his gun and bayonet. And we could hear the massacre going on outside. When it stopped, the men who were working for us went into the rattan factory grounds and found parts of bodies and dead bodies hanging on the reeds on the Pasig River near our docks. And of course, this scared all of Santa Ana. And people there said, we have to go and complain about this. But nobody could really find out where to go, who to ask for help. And so it was just forgotten. One day, soon after this, the rattan factories burned. It was a huge fire. And we went out to the fields because our house was right next to it. It was a extremely, extremely big fire. And so we slept in the fields until we could go back to our house.